Chihuahua rushed to Deputy Consul Victor's personal room, eager to inform him that it was time to get ready for work. However, as soon as he opened the door, his words got stuck in his mouth as he saw Victor sleeping peacefully amidst blood-stained sheets and dead bodies scattered around the room. Victor woke up and rubbed his eyes, greeting Chihuahua with a pleasant good morning. Chihuahua couldn't help but ask about the corpses lying around the room, to which Victor casually replied that he wasn't sure and that it seemed like he had killed them in his sleep. Chihuahua was taken aback and asked if Victor was serious, to which Victor simply laughed and told him that it was just a joke. As they walked down the hallway, Chihuahua asked Victor about his childhood experiences. Victor responded by asking if Chihuahua didn't find his earlier joke funny. Chihuahua clarified that it wasn't about the joke being funny or not. Victor then made a thoughtful expression and thought aloud about the recent inconveniences he had faced. He remembered being hit by 2 poison arrows, drinking poison drinks 4 times, facing acid, snipers, arson, getting run over by a cart, and various other dangerous situations. Scratching his ear, Victor questioned if he had gathered someone's attention. Chihuahua responded by saying that he thought Victor had gone insane. Victor contemplated the skills stored in Beelzebub, the sword summoned from his arm. He couldn't help but be impressed with the effectiveness of the Hellish Buffalo's Tough Life skill, which he had obtained during the last illegal auction. The skill had a risk rating of A, but it had proven to be even more effective than he had initially thought. All 3 of Beelzebub's slots were filled with skills: Burn Injury Cerberus, Hemorrhage Hellhound, and Tough Life Hellish Buffalo. With the enhancements of the River Styx and Tough Life enhancing his body, even Graduator Class Assassin has been unable to pierce his skin. Despite his satisfaction with the power of his skills, the continued attempts on his life had started to become bothersome. Victor knew he needed to investigate and put an end to the assassinations. Chihuahua smiled in agreement with his decision. Suddenly, Victor and Chihuahua noticed a carriage in front of them. They both recognized the flag on the carriage as Baskervilles and expressed surprise that the Baskervilles had arrived there. Victor looked serious and guessed that they had likely been sent by the main family. As the carriage door opened, the guests began to walk down from it. Chihuahua, who was standing with Victor, started to sweat profusely as he looked at the guest. As the guest looked at them, Chihuahua stood at attention and wondered if the guest was who he thought he was. On the other hand, Victor looked calmly at this new guest. This new guest was none other than the head butler John Barrymore. The butler greeted Victor with a smile, remarking on how it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. Victor acknowledged his greeting, complimenting the butler on how much better he looked now. The butler approached Victor, jokingly asking if he really thought so. He then remarked that he had believed Victor would do well ever since he had left the main residence. Victor replied modestly, saying that he had just been lucky. As General Secretary Chihuahua stood by, he observed the head butler John Barrymore with a sense of awe. He recognized him as the best head butler of the Barrymore family, who had been serving the notoriously scary Baskerville family for 4 generations. He couldn't believe he was in the presence of his role model. Victor interrupted Chihuahua's thoughts as he asked head butler what had brought him all the way to their location. The head butler replied that the patriarch had praised Victor's progress and had ordered him to return to the main residence, seeming very happy about it. Victor couldn't believe that Hugo could be happy, and he imagined his smiling face in disbelief. The patriarch of the Baskerville clan, Hugo, was reading an article with the title "The Most Beloved Figure of the Underdog Citizens, Victor." The article detailed how Victor had won multiple awards, including being the most trusted among merchants, most loved among farmers, most respected among children and scholars, and the most targeted by assassins. Hugo then looked up at Victor and commented that the Baskervilles were only known for using weapons and not their brains. However, with Victor's actions, they could change that image. Hugo praised Victor, telling him that he had done well. Victor humbly bowed his head and placed his hand on his chest, saying that he had just done what he was supposed to do. However, he couldn't help but wonder if the face Hugo was making was supposed to be a happy face. Hugo declared that one must reward and punish according to the situation. He then announced that Victor would be the one to attend the academy that year. Upon hearing this, Victor remained calm and thought to himself that this was expected. He knew that the academy that he would attend was called Colosseo, which was considered the best academy in the empire. The academy catered to the children of aristocracy and royal families and required students to reside in the dormitories for internal security. Victor saw this as an opportunity to grow stronger while avoiding Hugo's attention. As Hugo continued, he mentioned that he planned to send a few others with Victor but had yet to choose whom. He then asked Vicar if he had any siblings whom he would like to attend with. Vicar replied that he was closest to Highborough, Middleborough, and Lowborough, all of whom he internally thought of as his potential sandbags. Hugo agreed with Vicar's decision and offered to send those 3 with him. Hugo then asked Vicar if he remembered the plan he had thought of when he was 8 years old. Vicar guessed that Hugo was referring to the plan they had come up with during the joint training with the Morgs. Vicar recalled that the plan was to lend the ruby mines to the Morg family and use them to get rid of the barbarians. With a smirk, Hugo confirmed that the plan had worked. Vicar asked him to clarify, to which Hugo explained that the Morgs had suggested a joint raid and they had been very humble about it. Hugo then suggested that Vicar should go on a territory inspection before entering the academy to check whether the laws he had altered were being upheld. He added that it would be a good experience for Vicar. Vicar bowed his head in agreement and said that he would follow Hugo's orders. Soon Vicar and Chihuahua walked out of the gates as Vicar got ready to depart. Chihuahua waved goodbye to Vicar with tears in his eyes. He addressed Vicar as deputy consul and promised to do his best with the administrative work in the meantime. Vicar turned back to look at Chihuahua and thought to himself that he would soon be parting ways with the Secretary General. As Vicar and his group traveled some distance from the city, Vicar suddenly called out, instructing someone to reveal themselves. Dozens of men dressed in black appeared from hiding places behind Vicar's group, including one who emerged right beside Vicar. Vicar apologized for making the man wait, explaining that he wanted the departure to be orderly. The man removed his head cover, revealing himself to be from the Pitbull Order, and his name was Staffordshire Baskerville. He assured Vicar that they would safely transport him to the Morg's juvenile fortress. Vicar asked about his uncle Bostontrier, and learned that he was doing well, but had become adamant about admitting Vicar into the Pitbull Order following the slave auction incident. However, Vicar internally admitted that his uncle made him feel uncomfortable. Vicar and Staffordshire arrived at an area with hills where they saw farmers working in the fields. Vicar asked if this was the region that they had lent to the Morgs, and observed that it didn't seem like anyone was breaking any laws. Staffordshire replied that the envoy team was supposedly sent for territory inspection, but Vicar knew that their real mission was to get rid of the barbarians. Staffordshire informed Vicar that the Morg family had formed a large group consisting of 3 delegates, 30 lower house parliament members, and about 100 mages who weren't legislative members. Vicar noted that the Morgs seemed to be taking the matter seriously. However, he thought to himself that the Baskervilles had only brought a dozen knights, and himself, a member of the lower house parliament, while the elites were on standby on the other side of the mountain range. He remembered Hugo's advice that it wouldn't be a bad idea to look into the barbarians' lifestyle. As Vicar and Staffordshire continued on their path, they soon spotted a fortress in the distance. Surrounding the fortress were many dead trees, and skeletons hung from their branches. Vicar explained to Staffordshire that a mage must have done this, and this must be a message to the barbarians from the Morgs. Staffordshire remarked that it was a scary warning, while Vicar found himself reminiscing about Camus Morg. He wondered how much she had grown since they last met. As they approached the fortress gate, 3 figures appeared above it, and a voice demanded to know who they were. Vicar and Staffordshire looked up in surprise and saw 3 identical girls standing there, one of whom declared that no one could pass without their permission, while the other 2 repeated her statement in unison. Vicar recognized the 3 girls and realized that they were the Morg's 3 flowers, the triplets Hysis, Middleseas, and Losis. Their reputation for insanity was well known, and their combined madness was said to reach the heavens. Vicar introduced himself as part of the envoy team from the Baskervilles, who had come to inspect the territory and improve friendly relations. He demanded that the fortress gates be opened for them. However, Hysis refused and said that she needed to report to the person in charge before they could enter. She suggested that they would get a response about tomorrow. Vicar questioned their right to stop him from entering his own land, but the triplets just smirked. Hysis reminded him about the tenant protection law, and mocked him for looking down on them because they were paying rent there. She continued to mock him, saying that the tenant protection law was made by his family. Vicar began to feel a headache and his hands started to glow with a red aura as he became increasingly annoyed by the persistent questions. However, he managed to control his anger and explained that he had made changes to the law to allow him to chase away tenants he didn't like. He reiterated his demand for the gates to be opened one final time, and a wave of killing intent and bloodlust emanated from Vicar, aimed directly at the Morg's 3 flowers, causing them to look upon Vicar with fear. Amidst this tension, Losis broke out in anger and cast a spell towards Vicar. She stated that she had heard that some psycho kid had taken charge of the underdog city, but they had dealt with enough of such individuals before and knew how to handle him. The spell landed near Vikir, causing his horse to jump to the side in fear. From high above the gate, Losis shouted at the group, demanding that they wait and not enter the morgue's land without permission. She insulted them, calling them stupid swordsmen. She even threatened to test the strength of the rising star of the Baskerville family. In response, Staffordshire started drawing his sword and said to Vikir that he didn't think the situation could be resolved with words. Vikir agreed with Staffordshire's words, indicating that he was prepared for a fight. As Vikir and Staffordshire were about to react, one of Vikir's group members shouted that the girls didn't even know their place, calling their words absurd. Two other members echoed his sentiment, saying the words were absurd. Vikir heard the voices and thought that he had heard these voices before. The three sisters then spoke, with Hysis saying that the group members were just mere underlings, Middleseas questioning if they thought their ranks were higher than theirs, and Losis saying that they didn't even know their place. The three members of Vikir's group stepped forward to confront Morg's three flowers, denying their accusations by saying "not us" repeatedly. The three members removed their hoods to reveal their faces, and they were none other than the Baskerville triplets, Highborough, Middleborough, and Lowborough. They stood with confidence and pointed at Vikir while declaring in unison that he was the symbol of Baskerville. The triplets then turned to Vikir and smiled while saying "leave this to us," assuring him that they would handle the situation. Upon hearing their words, Vikir made a strange expression and exclaimed that his annoyance had increased to the power of 2. Vikir found himself questioning the identity and intentions of the individuals before him. Their strange behavior left him bewildered and curious. Highborough glanced back at Vikir, expressing his gratitude for recommending them to the academy. He indicated that Vikir should leave this situation in their capable hands. Vikir's thoughts raced as he began to piece together the situation. It became clear to him that their actions were motivated by their connection to the academy. However, he couldn't help but see them as mere sandbags. Vikir was aware that in the future, the triplets would become murderous soldiers. They lacked the intelligence to make independent judgments but could effectively carry out orders. Vikir believed that with his training, they would prove to be useful. Vikir smiled and expressed his intention to place his trust in the triplets while referring to them as his older brothers. Upon receiving Vikir's affirmation, the Baskerville triplets displayed signs of joy and satisfaction. Morg's three flowers, who had observed this exchange, expressed their disdain for the Baskerville triplets' close bond, labeling them as ignorant fools who relied solely on each other. Unfazed by the taunts, the Baskerville triplets responded defiantly, while showing their middle fingers, and asserted that it was Morg's three flowers who were the real fools. Morg's three flowers were fueled by anger and vowed to discipline the Baskerville triplets for their insolence. Vikir's thoughts shifted as he recalled his past knowledge. Before his regression, he had known the Morg triplets as powerful mages who possessed the attributes of water, earth, and nature. Their combination of highly compatible magic attributes exponentially enhanced the effects of their spells, earning them the title of the Morg's Three Flowers. As the Morg's Three Flowers combined their magical abilities, a colossal vine made of soil and plants emerged, forming a formidable barrier. Hysis, positioned atop the wall, burst into laughter, mocking the Baskerville triplets with her taunts. Middleseas and Losis turned to their adversaries, questioning if they could overcome the obstacle. Undeterred, Highborough readied his sword, dismissing the plant barrier as insignificant. With precision and skill, Highborough executed the Baskerville first technique, effortlessly slicing through the massive vines. Staffordshire marveled at his perfect execution of the first technique. However, before Highborough could fully recover, he sensed an incoming attack. He managed to block a whip-like strike from the vines with his sword, although the force behind it pushed him backward. Middleborough and Lowborough called out in worry as they witnessed Highborough's predicament. Losis wore a smug expression, mocking the Baskerville triplets and asserting that their swords were incapable of reaching them. The Baskerville triplets responded with intense anger, their expressions resembling hounds ready to hunt their prey. Staffordshire turned to Vikir and asked him if he found the situation enjoyable. Perplexed, Vikir questioned what Staffordshire was referring to. Staffordshire explained the ongoing clash between magic and swordsmanship, highlighting the long-standing debate about which is stronger. Magic utilizes surrounding mana to amplify and reproduce elemental powers, while swordsmanship channels the user's energy and mana for explosive and enduring strength. Staffordshire found pleasure in observing the potential and talents of the clans of mages and swordsmen who would shape the future. Vikir said that if viewed from that perspective, he was also a part of them. Staffordshire commented that Vikir had already surpassed others his age. Vikir, uninterested in the ongoing fight, expressed his frustration and wished for all of them to perish. He felt that it was a waste of time, as he had important tasks to attend to, having recently found a supervisor with a significant workload. Just then, someone arrived at the scene and began casting a fiery spell. Anger infused her voice as she questioned what the others were doing in front of her territory. Hibaro, who was busy fighting, took the opportunity to attack Hysis, believing he had the upper hand. However, the situation quickly changed as they noticed a massive fire approaching them. They were taken aback and shocked by the unexpected turn of events. A tremendous explosion of fire engulfed the area, causing tension in Staffordshire but eliciting a smile from Vikir, who wondered if everyone had perished. To Vikir's annoyance, he realized that the Baskerville triplets had survived the attack. He looked at them with a displeased expression, uttering a disapproving sound. Hibaro, in a state of shock, questioned the sudden appearance of fire magic. Middleborough shouted at the figures behind the smoke wall, expressing frustration at the near-death experience they had just encountered. Behind the dissipating smoke, the three flowers of the Morgue clan were in tears. Middleseas, still shaken from the near-death experience, expressed her relief at having survived. Hysis chimed in, acknowledging that if she had dodged the attack even slightly later, she might not have been so fortunate. Losis, scared and seeking comfort, voiced her fears to her older sisters. The person responsible for the powerful fire spell questioned the situation and asked what was going on here. Vikir looked up at the figure who had unleashed the attack. It was Camus Morgue, standing atop the castle gate wall with flames still burning in her hands. Camus looked down and declared her inability to forgive anyone who caused trouble within her managed territory. As she landed in front of Morgue's three flowers, Middleseas tried to explain that their intention was to stop the invader, while Losis added that the fight had been initiated by the other party. Camus cast a cold gaze upon them and questioned their informal way of addressing her as Camus, emphasizing her position as the vice head of the fortress. Middleseas couldn't help but shudder in fear, denying any disrespect and quickly correcting herself, addressing Camus with the appropriate honorific. Camus then pointed towards the treetops where dead skeletons hung, warning them to be cautious if they wished to avoid a similar fate. Middleseas let out a frightened cry and apologized for their actions. Camus noticed Vikir, and her eyes widened in shock. She approached him and remarked that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, recalling that it had been 7 years. Vikir smiled and acknowledged that it had been a while, and he greeted her as Camus Morgue. Vikir wondered if Camus's more mature appearance was the reason for her increased attractiveness. He pondered the beauty of Camus Morgue, who had captivated the hearts of many men in high society. In his previous life, there had been scandals and rumors surrounding her, as she allured even married men. However, he found it strange that there were no such rumors in this lifetime. Nevertheless, he brushed off those thoughts. Vikir straightforwardly requested Camus to open the door, stating that words wouldn't work on the triplets. Camus was taken aback by his blunt words. She looked angry and questioned if that was all he had to say after such a long time. Vikir gazed at her with a look of curiosity and inquired about what he should say instead. Camus's anger flared, and she exclaimed in frustration. Staffordshire observed Camus's escalating anger and wondered if the next fight would be between the superstars of the two clans. Camus pointed her finger at Vikir. Her eyes filled with angry tears, and declared that he scored 0 points. She accused him of having a disrespectful attitude towards his future wife, giving him a score of 0 out of 100. The Morgue's three flowers, the Baskerville triplets, Vikir, and Staffordshire all looked at Camus Morgue in disbelief. Camus averted her gaze to the side, her face blushing, and muttered a huff. Everyone present was left with the same question in their minds. Whose wife? Vikir and Camus rode their horses together, making their way toward the fortress. Camus remarked that the Baskerville clan seemed to have little knowledge about the barbarians. Vikir confidently replied that they were well aware of the barbarians and fought against them frequently. He claimed that they knew more about the barbarians than Morgues did. Camus questioned why Vikir had sent the idiots then, referring to the Baskerville triplets, whom she considered young and foolish hounds. Vikir explained that it had already been agreed with the Morgue clan that the main force would be positioned on the other side of the mountain range. He questioned why Camus was asking when she already knew the arrangement. Camus smiled and remarked that she believed Vikir might not be well informed about barbarians. Vikir retorted, asserting that as the person in charge of the delegation, he naturally possessed extensive knowledge. Camus said that despite being someone whom the clan might have wanted to discard, he seemed to be quite trusted within the clan. The topic shifted to which of the barbaric tribes was the most annoying. Vikir looked at Camus and thought to himself that she kept asking questions. He then mentioned the warrior tribe called Balak and the sorcerer tribe known as Rococo. He emphasized the exceptional archery skills of the Balaks, which surpassed those of the Empire. He also mentioned that this information was not widely known. Camus acknowledged Victor's knowledge about the ecology of the barbaric tribes and awarded him 8 points out of 100 in her own unique scoring system. Confused, Victor questioned the purpose of the points. Camus simply replied that it was because he had answered well. Victor looked at her with a hint of curiosity. Camus continued her evaluation of Victor, expressing her dislike for intelligent men and stating that she found men more interesting when they were a little foolish. Firstly, Camus turned her attention to horseback riding, remarking that Victor's choice of a large horse was ill-suited for his shorter stature. She considered this a flaw and decided to deduct 6 points. Continuing her evaluation, she moved on to fashion and expressed her disappointment with Victor's lackluster clothing choices, assigning him a mere 4 points in this category. When she noticed that Victor was ignoring her, she gave him just 1 point for his mannerisms. Camus then smiled and awarded his face 99 points. However, due to his poor control over his facial expressions, she deducted 1 point. Victor, growing frustrated, told Camus to stop the useless evaluation. Camus questioned why it was useless, asserting that she needed to be stern with her future husband. Victor, perplexed, asked why he was considered her future husband. Camus reminded him of a test he had passed previously, which was conducted by her uncle. Victor realized she was referring to an incident that happened 7 years ago when he had dueled Camus' uncle to test his abilities as a potential husband. Camus became angry, expressing her dissatisfaction with her uncle's decision and how it had obstructed her path to marriage. She reluctantly acknowledged the promise that had been made and decided to follow through with it, although she resented the situation. While Camus was venting her frustrations, Victor observed her and acknowledged her prowess as a great fire mage. Interrupting her, Victor declared that he had forgotten about what happened that day, and that he would make it as if it never occurred. Camus's face flushed red after hearing this, and she threw a jacket at Victor. She exclaimed that he couldn't simply reverse something that had happened and called him a dummy. She referred to herself as a genius and boasted that once she witnessed something, she never forgot it. Victor looked at the jacket that Camus had thrown at him and realized that it was the same jacket he had given her during their duel 7 years ago when her clothes had burnt. Camus, with a red face, dismissed Victor's words as nonsense. Victor examined the jacket and wondered if she had returned it without washing it. As they reached the outskirts of the fortress, Camus informed Victor that the barbarians had ambushed the ruby mine, either pillaging the indigenous slaves or the crops. She explained that they took slaves to sell them elsewhere. She pointed out a wall that had been built by both earth and iron mages over the course of a month. Impressed, Victor acknowledged the skill of the morgue mages, noting that it would have taken several hundred regular people around a year to achieve the same result. Camus proudly affirmed his observation. Victor noticed some large holes in the wall and asked if they were caused by the arrows shot by the Balaks. Camus confirmed that the arrows carried a strong aura and had caused numerous casualties during nighttime guard duty. She mentioned that the arrows were capable of breaking through 2 to 3 meters thick walls, showcasing the unmatched talent of the Balaks. She revealed that her uncle had suffered a severe chest injury from the arrows that breached the shield's magic, but fortunately, he survived, albeit with wounded pride. Victor recalled that the patriarch of his clan had a similar experience and had injured his nose bridge. Curious, Victor inquired about the talented individual among the barbarians, to which Camus responded that she believed it was a female. Due to their black painted faces, it was challenging to discern their physical traits. Victor and Camus turned around as a mage approached them, addressing Camus as the vice head of the fortress. The mage reported that a recon member of the barbarians had been captured and urged them to come quickly. Curious and concerned, Camus and Victor followed the mage to a tent where the captive barbarian was being held. Victor observed the barbarian and identified him as a member of the Rococo sorcerer tribe. Camus inquired if any information had been extracted from him. The mage informed them that the barbarian remained uncooperative and resistant to psychic magic due to his strong sorcery, making it impossible to read his mind. Camus then questioned the barbarian about the recent ambush on the Mork clan's fortress and asked him if he remembered how many people they had kidnapped. When the barbarian remained silent, she further added that among the victims, there was a daughter of the Morks. Her name was Rose, and she was Camus' sixth cousin. She asked the barbarian what had been done to her. The barbarian responded with a smile and spoke something in his native barbarian language. Camus turned to the mage and requested a translation, asking about the whereabouts of the barbarian who rebelled. The mage reported that when the barbarians attacked, everyone at the fortress had either died or been taken away. Camus then asked if there was anyone present who could translate what the barbarian was saying. to which the mage replied that, at that moment, there was no one available. Suddenly, Vicar spoke up, stating that he knew a little of the Rococo language. Camus expressed surprise, questioning what Vicar didn't know how to do. Vicar clarified that he was not fluent and only had a basic understanding of the vocabulary. Camus requested Vicar to ask the barbarian about the whereabouts of her kidnapped sixth cousin, describing her as a 12-year-old girl with red eyes, red hair, and white skin. Vicar posed the question to the barbarian in the barbarian language, and the barbarian responded with an evil smile and gave him a short reply. Vicar closed his eyes and relayed the grim news to Camus: her cousin was dead. Camus's face filled with anger upon hearing this. She declared that since the senator of the audience hall was currently being treated and the senator of the temple was away on an inspection, the decision would be made by her, Camus Morgue, a member of the middle house and the vice head of the fortress. She declared the verdict: immediate execution. A spike pierced the barbarian's body, and soon he was consumed by fire. As the barbarian burned, he uttered something, but Camus dismissed his words, saying that after the war, the language he spoke would only be used in hell. The barbarian's companion watched in horror as he met his fiery demise. Camus, still filled with anger, turned around and urged Vicar to follow her. Vicar silently observed her departing figure. As Vicar exited the tent, he was greeted by the sight of Camus crying out loud. He walked towards her, recognizing that despite her tough exterior, she was still only 15 years old. Vicar asked her about her close relationship with her cousin, and Camus confirmed that they were indeed very close. She described her cousin as a pure child who didn't fit into the cold-hearted Morgue clan. Vicar tried to console her, saying that he believed her cousin had left this world comfortably. However, Camus looked at him and expressed her doubts, stating that she was a genius and understood a little of what was said. She asked him to tell her honestly if what she heard was true. Vicar felt tense and wondered if she had understood the barbarian's words correctly. What the barbarian had said previously was, "We ate her." Tears once again flooded Camus's eyes, and she fell to her knees, apologizing for not being able to protect her younger cousin. Vicar witnessed her anguish and initially extended his hand to comfort her. However, he hesitated and retracted his hand back. Camus's cries filled the air, leaving Vicar standing there, pondering the situation. After some time, Camus managed to stop crying and wipe the tears from her eyes. She expressed that it wasn't a bad thing, stating that if someone had shown half-hearted sympathy, she would have killed them. Looking at Vicar, she declared that it was not the time to mourn and that she needed to quickly regain her composure and seek revenge. Vicar observed her strength and determination, acknowledging that heroines were indeed different. He extended his hand toward Camus, agreeing with her sentiment. However, before she could take his hand, a loud voice sounded, resembling a bell-like sound. Vicar questioned the source of the sound, and Camus stood up, explaining that it was the signal that notified them of a barbarian attack. Vicar remarked that her time for revenge had come rather quickly.